Imagine a world where the very concept of color is a luxury reserved for the gods and the highest of kings. In the middle of the 15th century, the landscape of everyday life for the common person is dominated by a relentless, muted palette. Most people live their entire lives surrounded by the browns of untreated sheep wool, the cold grays of weathered stone, and the various shades of dried mud and dust. To see a vibrant color is a shock to the system, an event that stops the heart. But then, in the middle of a bustling medieval market, you see it. A flash of deep royal crimson that looks like a fresh wound against the grey. A heavy cloak of midnight blue that seems to hold the very essence of the deep ocean within its folds. A yellow so radiant and saturated that it looks like captured sunlight woven into fabric. These are not the products of modern chemical laboratories or synthetic industrial dyes. They are the result of a grueling, secret, and often dangerous process of biological and chemical transformation. How did a single man, working in a workshop filled with choking steam and pungent, unbearable odors, turn common weeds, crushed insects, and rusted minerals into pigments that would not fade for 500 years? Today we step back into the intense heat and the stinging vapors of the dye vat to witness the birth of color before the machine. It is the year 1462. We are on the outskirts of Florence, Italy, a city that breathes and grows wealthy through the mastery of its textile trade. This is a world where the quality of your cloth is your primary identity. Our guide through this world of liquid light is Master Lorenzo, a man whose physical body has been sacrificed to his craft. His hands and forearms are permanently stained a deep, bruised purple, a mark of his trade that no amount of scrubbing can ever remove. To the uninitiated, his workshop looks less like a place of business and more like a den of forbidden alchemy. Large copper cauldrons bubble incessantly over open wood fires, thick white vapors cling to the heavy timber rafters, and the air is thick with the sharp, acidic scent of vinegar, wood ash lye, and other biological ingredients that are much more unpleasant to the nose. In this era, color is not just decoration. Color is absolute power. It is a rigid social marker. To wear a specific shade of scarlet is to announce your wealth and your lineage to the entire world from a mile away. But to achieve that perfect stable red, Master Lorenzo must embark on a journey that begins months before the first thread is ever dipped into a vat. Before a single drop of pigment can even touch the fabric, a silent, invisible chemical battle must be fought within the fibers of the material. This is the stage most people forget, but it is the most critical. Most natural dyes found in plants and minerals do not naturally want to stay on the wool or the silk. If you simply boil a cloth with crushed berries or flower petals, the color will look beautiful for an hour, but it will wash away with the very first rain or fade under the first week of summer sun. To bridge the architectural gap between the plant pigment and the animal fiber, the dyer needs a substance known as a mordant. This word comes from the Latin word mordere, which means to bite. The mordant is the chemical teeth that allow the color to bite into the fabric and never let go. Master Lorenzo begins this process with alum. In the middle of the 15th century, this white crystalline mineral is considered more precious than silver or gold. It is the essential chemical bridge. He spends hours crushing the alum into a fine, sparkling powder using a heavy stone mortar and pestle. This powder is then dissolved into a massive vat of pure, soft rainwater. The wool, which has been sheared from sheep in the high Tuscan hills and meticulously cleaned of all its natural grease and lanolin, is submerged into this clear, simmering liquid. It must stay there for hours, never reaching a violent boil, but whispering in the heat. This slow process prepares the microscopic scales of the wool to open up wide and receive the coming transformation. Without this invisible foundation of alum, the most expensive and rare dyes in the world are nothing more than temporary stains. The first great color of the medieval world, and perhaps the most difficult to master, is blue. But in 1462, creating blue is a test of extreme patience and physical endurance. Master Lorenzo does not have access to a liquid paint or a simple powder. He must rely on the woad plant. The leaves of this plant have been harvested months ago, crushed into a thick green paste, rolled into heavy balls by hand, and allowed to ferment for weeks until they smell of rotting vegetation and ammonia. This is the smell of the dyer's life. He throws these hard fermented balls into a deep wooden vat filled with a mixture of stale urine and wood ash lye. While it sounds repulsive to the modern ear, this specific biological cocktail creates the exact alkaline environment needed to make the blue dye soluble in water. The vat must be kept at a precise, warm temperature for several days and nights. Master Lorenzo or his apprentices must stir this heavy, dark liquid every few hours, never letting it settle. As the fermentation reaches its peak, the liquid in the vat actually looks sickening. It is not blue at all, but a murky, yellowish-green soup, with a thick, iridescent scum floating on the surface. Then comes the sudden moment of pure magic that defines the dyer's art. Master Lorenzo reaches into the vat and pulls out a heavy woolen cloth. When it first emerges from the liquid, the cloth looks drab, ugly, and muddy yellow. But as the oxygen in the fresh air touches the wet, steaming fibers for the first time, a miracle occurs right before your eyes. The yellow turns to a bright green, and then, in a sudden, sharp chemical snap, it deepens into a rich celestial blue. It is as if the fabric is breathing in the very color of the sky. This is the oxidation process, a complex piece of chemistry performed by a man who cannot read a periodic table, who has never heard of an oxygen molecule, but who understands the secret soul of the elements through his senses. The cloth must be dipped again and again, dozens of times, to reach the darkest shades of navy. Each dip adds another layer of permanence, another level of depth that no machine can truly replicate. If blue is the color of the sky and the spirit, then red is the color of status, blood, and empire. To produce the deepest, most prestigious crimson, Master Lorenzo does not look to the garden or the forest. He looks to the microscopic world. He relies on the kermes insect, a tiny parasite found on oak trees, or the even more precious cochineal that arrives in small, expensive shipments from distant, exotic lands. These insects must be gathered by hand, one by one, a task of unimaginable tedium. It takes thousands upon thousands of these tiny, dried husks to produce even a single pound of concentrated dye powder. Master Lorenzo grinds the insects in a large stone mortar until they become a fine, dull, dark, purple dust. At this stage, it looks like nothing special. But when that dust hits a cauldron of boiling water that has been treated with cream of tartar, the liquid erupts into a red so vivid and so deep that it almost seems to glow from within the copper pot. The cost of this single vat of red dye is equivalent to the entire yearly wages of a common laborer. Because the stakes are so high, the atmosphere in the workshop becomes silent and tense. Master Lorenzo watches the temperature of the fire with the intensity of a hunting hawk. He knows that if the water becomes just a few degrees too hot, the delicate organic pigments will scorch, and the red will turn into a muddy, worthless brown. If the water is too cool, the color will be pale, weak, and pink, unworthy of a nobleman's garment. He uses his bare skin to sense the heat radiating from the copper, risking burns to ensure the perfection of the batch. This is the physical toll of color. If you respect the grit, the sweat, and the absolute precision of these ancient artisans, please take a moment to subscribe to Before the Machine. By joining us, you help keep the memory of these incredible human skills alive. As we move deeper into the workshop, we find that some colors require even more complex layers of labor. Pure, vibrant green is surprisingly rare in nature's primary dye pot. You cannot simply boil grass and expect the cloth to turn the color of a meadow. To achieve the lush, deep green of a summer forest, Master Lorenzo must perform a double transformation, a process of layering one life onto another. First, he dyes the heavy cloth in a yellow extract made from the weld plant, a common spindly weed that grows in the cracks of stone walls and along the dusty roadsides. The cloth comes out of this first vat, looking like a bright, sun-drenched lemon. Once it has dried, he must then submerge that same yellow cloth into the blue of the woad vat we saw earlier. The careful layering of these two primary colors creates what the medieval world calls Lincoln green. This is the legendary color associated with the outlaws of the deep woods, a color that allows a man to vanish into the shadows of the oaks. For the brightest, most expensive yellows, he might use saffron, but he knows these are fugitive colors. They are beautiful for a moment, but they flee from the strength of the sun. To make his colors permanent and somber, he employs the chemistry of the earth itself. He adds iron filings or oak galls to his mixtures. Oak galls are the strange, hard, ball-like growths found on oak trees, caused by the larvae of tiny wasps. These galls are incredibly rich in tannins. When added to a dye bath, they act as a powerful darkening agent. They can turn a bright, cheerful yellow into a deep, somber olive. Or if used in high enough concentrations with iron, they can produce a rich, jet black that remains dark for centuries. In the 15th century, a true deep black is the most difficult color of all to achieve. It requires a perfect balance of blue, red, and tannin. A man who can dye a perfect black is considered a master among masters. However, the work is never finished when the cloth finally leaves the steaming vat. The most critical stage for the longevity of the color is the final cleaning, a stage of brutal physical labor. Master Lorenzo and his apprentices must carry the heavy, sodden, water-bolted fabrics down to the banks of the nearby river. In the cold flowing water, they must stand for hours, regardless of the season. They use heavy wooden paddles to beat the cloth against flat stones. This is not to clean dirt, but to force out every single trace of loose, unbonded pigment. They beat the fabric until their shoulders ache and their breath comes in ragged gasps. If the water running off the cloth into the river is not crystal clear, the job is not done. This is the true hidden secret of why these medieval colors have lasted for 500 years in our museums. They were not just coated onto the surface like a modern print. They were chemically bonded into the very heart of the fiber and then tested by the relentless pounding force of the river water. The dyer's muscles are permanently knotted from this labor. His skin is often cracked and bleeding from the harsh alkaline lye, and his lungs are heavy with the weight of a lifetime of inhaling acidic steam. But when he looks at the finished product, he sees a miracle. He has taken the grey, dull world of the peasant and transformed it into a tapestry of light. By the time the sun begins to set over the Arno River, the heavy wooden drying racks of the workshop are draped in a rainbow of fabrics that seem defiant against the darkening sky. These bolts of cloth will be carefully packed into wooden crates and shipped to the great royal courts of Europe, from London to Paris to Vienna. They will be fashioned into doublets for princes, heavy capes for cardinals, and flowing gowns for duchesses. When we look at a medieval tapestry today in a modern museum, we are often looking at the faded ghosts of what they once were. Time and light eventually take their toll on all things. But we must remember that when those threads were fresh from Master Lorenzo's copper vat, they were the equivalent of neon. They were the high-definition screens of the 15th century. In a world of mud and stone, these colors were the only way a human being could truly own a piece of the natural world's hidden brilliance. Today, we live in a world of instant gratification. We push a single button on a plastic machine and a computer sprays synthetic petroleum-based ink onto a polyester blend. We have gained convenience, but we have lost the connection to the earth. We have forgotten the smell of the fermenting woad leaves. We have forgotten the crushing weight of the water-soaked wool. We have forgotten the incredible, deep botanical knowledge required to turn a roadside weed into a royal masterpiece. Master Lorenzo was not just a manual laborer. He was a chemist before chemistry existed. He was an artist who worked with fire and biology. He was a guardian of the world's vibrance. The machine gave us every color imaginable, but it took away the soul of the process. The next time you see a vibrant, deep color, take a moment to remember the man with the stained purple hands. Picture him standing over a steaming copper cauldron in the flickering light of the fire, whispering to the elements and waiting for the air to turn a yellow cloth into a royal blue. The colors of our past were not just seen. They were earned through sweat, through fire, and through an incredible amount of time. Thank you for traveling back in time with us to the workshop of the master dyer. If you want to see more of the world before the machine, and if you want to discover how our ancestors built the foundations of our civilization with nothing but their bare hands and the wisdom of nature, please click the video appearing on your screen now. We have many more stories of ancient mastery to share. Do not forget to subscribe and help us keep the old ways alive for the next generation.